Give a warm welcome to Mike Surtees.
Thank you.
Okay, so for those that don't know, tell us about your non-dog related business. Do you own a dog? Sit down.
I did. Yeah, my name's Mike. I own an indoor climbing centre in Norwich. Been open for 12 years this year, and yeah, we've grown year on year apart from the COVID years. And this year, our big challenge is the fact that our landlord politely told us that we can't stay beyond our lease, so we have to move buildings. So we're, in the next 6 months, we've got to move to a new building, which we've found, and planning application is in. But some big challenges.
There's 1,000 things here. So first of all, let's set context as to why people might want to pay attention. Most people, if they've got any experience of climbing centres, would be little pokey industrial units that are freezing cold, where it's all a bit rough around the edges, and there's a load of people working for minimum wage, and it makes about £6.30 a year. So Highball is not that. So for context, revenues, team size, whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Yeah, so we currently have 25 team members, which equates to about 10.5 FTE. We turned over 830,000 year ending August last year. We set the target to hit the million this year, but at the halfway point of the year, I think we're going to do about 960.
Yeah, so right on that £1 million mark, but profitable, healthy profit margins, and also for context, the last 12 months has been your best ever.
Yeah, so last year was record year, yeah.
And the last quarter has been your best ever.
Yes.
And if I remember rightly, that's in revenue, profit, and balance sheets.
Yes.
Very good. Well, first of all,
yeah,
record-breaking quarter. Give it up for Mike. So, I wanted to Mike up here because I think he's handling what is an extremely critical point in his business very well. So he already spoke to Andy. They lease a unit, have leased it for a long time, and then it's being redeveloped. And so he's basically being kicked out. And obviously, some of the businesses in this room are location specific, some aren't, but clearly a climbing centre is. So there was an extensive hunt on to find a suitable location, because this is not, your current unit's how many square feet?
Just under 11,000. Yeah,
so it's not a small building, and it's got to meet all kinds of criteria, because you need the parking, there's a whole bunch of criteria, which makes it quite hard to find. And after an extensive search, Mike ended up finding a unit which was, how big is it?
26,000.
26,000 square feet, which means it was kind of like, oh, right, well, we're going to have to more than double everything. And of course, because his previous lease was more than 10 years old, he was on very preferential rates. The increase in rates, kind of the market rates in that time, has been significant. Or
yeah.
4x or...
Yeah.
Yeah, in that ballpark, 4x in that time window. So now you're kind of going, okay, the building was getting relatively close to capacity anyway, but, to make that big leap and the costs of moving, in fact, let's just scare the crap out of them, Mike. How much is this move going to cost?
Between £500,000 and £600,000.
Yeah, between 500 and 600 grand in terms of, because the fit out, right? But at the same time, there's no choice. Because the nature of the lease comes to the end, landlord redeveloping, so you've got a profitable, which is making a very healthy margin on £1 million, so, well into six figures, right? And then you're going to go, okay, but now we've got to double down, or we're going to go home. So, talk to us, Mike, about what there will be some people in this room. I mean, I know you can only speak to your business specifically, but they reach inflection points. So Darren was kind of speaking to it with his business acquisition, right? It took a slightly different form than his first two sites, but there was an opportunity for growth that required him to have a capital outlay. Okay, what were some of your key lessons on this process now that you're imminently about to pull the trigger on a biggest probable financial spend you've ever made in your life outside possibly your home?
I think right now my biggest learning point right now is probably to have worked harder on the heads of terms earlier on. So I guess there's two things. Number one was we could have been out sooner, but we would have been exiting before our lease currently ends, and I know we'd have to pay it out. So initially, I was kind of just playing the long game, just delaying as long as I could to kind of bring the two timelines together. Now the two timelines are coming together quite nicely in terms of when we need to exit our building and when we can take the new building on. All of a sudden, the solicitor's now gone, oh, actually, what about this? What about this? What about this? So potentially, we could have had it into legals completely about 4 weeks ago, and now we're still just niggling on the final percentages of getting the heads of terms over. So I definitely wish I'd been more on it with our solicitor potentially, but then slower in terms of replies to their side.
Okay, good. I know there's a few people with debates with landlords, etc. How did you think about, because obviously this is a lease with a six-figure rent, Ricky, and it's, what's the term of the lease?
15 years, 10-year break. 15
years with a break at 10, right? So there's seven figures on this, on this arrangement, on this lease that they're going to pay to this landlord. What were the most critical kind of component parts? And you've spoken to about heads of terms, getting clear on the heads of terms to avoid the dance, which is virtually inevitable to a certain degree in the latter stages. How did you think about the capital that was involved, the raising of the finance? Any key thoughts or takeaways there?
Yeah, so whenever somebody starts talking about the headline figures, it gets quite scary. And in order to try and maintain some level of calm, I kind of need to just remind myself of the kind of the overall journey, which is before COVID, I'd already started looking for a building because we were getting into capacity at evenings and weekends. So I knew we needed something else. So basically, I've been looking for a new building anyway for about 5 years. Initially, it was to move. And then we went through this process of actually, well, why do we need to move? Why don't we look for a second site in Norwich, which is more, almost the opposite side of the city. There is some kind of feedback now from the overall industry that people tend to go to the climbing wall that's closest to their house. So I knew if we opened one on the other side of the city, we'd cannibalise site one, but we'd probably create a whole new market over there because it's on people's doorsteps. So we started looking for another building between 6,000 and 10,000 square feet. So we were looking for this. We got close on a few. We were looking to buy one. But the main problem was that once landlords found out what we wanted to do with it, they didn't want leisure on their estate.
What do you think that was?
I think it's because, having spoken to the agent who runs our site, I think it's because if they allow a screw fix on, their customers turn up, they pick it up, they go. Whereas our customers are staying for 2 hours. So you've got 2 hours worth of cars, 100, 200 customers. That's a lot of traffic sitting around on an industrial estate. And anybody with a warehouse will probably know that most warehouses come with like 8 to 12 car parking spaces, so it's a bit of an issue. That's the only thing I can really think of. So yeah, we were looking for a second site. We probably looked at 5, 6 in total. Never really got anywhere close. I inquired about another site which was a bit smaller. The idea was to maybe turn that into a kids-only centre. But that was already in for planning with a potential new client. But the agent said, oh, what about this building, which was massive? It's like 45,000 square feet. It's an ex-data centre for Aviva. I went and had a look at it, and I was like, okay, how much is it? And it was $750 a square foot, and they were willing to split it. But the thing is, it was twice as big as what we've currently got. So we kind of ended...
Actually 4 times as big.
Well, it's 4 times as big. They're willing to split it, yeah. So the way I'm kind of weighing it up in my head is this. The current lease that we're on is cheap. If we were staying where we were, our rent would probably be doubling. If we had gone down the road of getting a second site in Norwich, I'd be paying market rent for that. So we'd effectively, in Norwich, if we had plan A, which was a second site at market rate, we'd be looking at roughly the same square footage with the same rent, but split over 2 sites. And the more people I've spoken to, once this building became available, it was kind of like, well, actually, operating from one site is going to be easier because you can have one fire alarm, one Wi-Fi system, one set of staff, or those staff could cross over, but you're bringing everything under one roof. So, yeah, obviously, the headline numbers are massive, but when you think of the plan that we had, it's actually not that far out from what we were aiming for. And we also get to start again from scratch with a blank canvas and put right all the things we've done wrong with this current building, which other climbing walls don't get the opportunity to do.
Yeah, I think necessity being the mother of invention. Mike didn't have a choice. Right, got a very profitable business that's grown healthily over time, and again, if you ignore COVID, it's a pretty healthy, solid upward trajectory over time. And it's like, well, we didn't have a choice, so we had to find the building. But the point I want to emphasise, Nikki, is that again, it was dressed up by hard work. Mike looked, and we discussed and debated it in this board of advisors group a variety of different buildings and opportunities that had come and gone, and not quite right. And this one, a lot of people would have passed because they would have just gone, my God, it is just too big. So how did you de-risk it? Because there's some people in this room that have had opportunities. In fact, I'm thinking of one right now, but I haven't asked permission, but that they saw an opportunity and they've not bet the farm, but they've made a significantly heavy bet on a high capital outlay, which is also what you've done, albeit yours was kind of forced upon you. You didn't have a choice other than the business closing. How are you de-risking this? Whether you want to call it in fit-out costs, £500,000, or whether you want to call it in terms of the lease overall spend, it's like it's a 7-figure deal that you've committed to here. So how have you de-risked it?
So in terms of de-risking it, the main one really is that it's quite, from the numbers I'm hearing through the industry, it's quite common for people to be spending upwards of £1 million on a brand new centre, like opening it in a brand new city, in a warehouse. What we did initially was, the building that we're currently in was probably 50% bigger than we needed when we opened. But after year one, the numbers were such that we started to eat into the spare space that we had. So from that experience and from having spoken to a couple of our long-term customers, I don't feel I need to go in and spend £1 million to fit it out from the off, because I'm not going to have the number of customers to warrant having that much climbing, for example. So the plan is to basically build the amount of climbing surface that we have in the current building, in the new building, but spread it out a little bit to create more space for customers. And then over the next sort of 5 years, we'll add to that as our numbers grow. So rather than just going with a big capital expenditure, it's like, well, this is what we can afford now, and then over the next 5 years, we might reinvest another 250 grand growing, but only as the numbers dictate we need to. So that's kind of the first one in terms of bringing down the build costs. The second one was just to run the numbers on what we need to do to afford it and start to put things in place to get us where we need to be. So we need to have probably about 300 visitors a day based on our average spend. So for us to afford it, we really need to hit the ground running with that number from the moment that we open. So I've never really had anybody full-time in marketing. It's been discussed a number of times in board of advisors, but I kind of pulled the pin and brought somebody in the middle of last year because they would need time to get themselves into the business, get their feet on the table, understand what we do, and then start to put things in place to grow towards that number. So quite often we talk about recruitment and breaking it down from an annual investment of their salary into like more of a, well, can you afford 3 months, can you afford 6 months, see how they get on. So that's really what I've done with that person, and we are now, after like 6-7 months of them being in, we're now starting to see a bit of an upturn in our daily numbers.
I just want to underline something here, that this is one of those kind of juxtaposed things again. On the one hand, we don't want to waste any unnecessary money. Like, I've got a tendency sometimes to be lazy and then get sloppy, and then you're just wasteful with spending, and it's all coming off your bottom line, Ricky. It's all coming off your bottom line. So you don't want to do that. But equally, James, sometimes the worst thing you can do is underspend. Because if you underspend, you don't get the result, and the venture fails, right? If you've got a good strategy and you kind of like half-arse go after it, it just doesn't work, and then all the money's been lost. Where if you fractionally or relatively fractionally overspend, okay, it might eat into your margin, but you get the result, right? So, and it's tricky because when do you deploy which strategy? Am I just spending excessively and this is stupid, or am I no? I'm at risk of under-resourcing that. I think you're probably going to look to your own behaviour historically and do the opposite of what your tendency is, right? So what I really like, what Mike's done is, it's kind of like, okay, he's being forced, Jim, to make this very significant move anyway. And it's like, well, okay, if we've got to make this move, we've already got the exposure. It's not like, oh, so what the hell does an extra salary matter? No, it does matter, but it's kind of going, well, if we've got this opportunity, we need to lean in and maximise it. This isn't a time to be gun shy, it's kind of, if we've got this extra space, Jensen, we need to leverage and maximise it. Because having the square footage doesn't drive revenue. It's the capacity, Leo, to drive revenue. We've also got to put the resource into generating that revenue to get the return.
Yeah.
I love it. Any final thoughts or words of wisdom, Mike?
I think the final one would just be like the impact that being part of Mastermind has had, really. So when I look at our visitor numbers as they currently are, we are just slightly behind where we were pre-pandemic. But our turnover is vastly higher because we put prices up in the last 3 years. But the reason I joined Mastermind was because I felt that where my previous work experience had got me to, had got the business to where it was, and I knew we were going to grow. I could see this curve happening. It was, it was going to be in the Olympics. Our numbers had just kind of spiked through 2019, and I thought, right, I need some help. And when I look back and look where I am now, I mean, my business really, in terms of the customer numbers, is exactly where I was then, but I feel well more prepared now for what's coming. I'm not nervous about it at all. I've got a really good board of advisors. So I wouldn't say that I've made quick changes over the last 3 years, but I think with what I've learned from here, it's all just about having a good system in place, building a really good team, trying to let go of things where you can and let them get on with it and let them build that trust with you. And yeah, things do start to fall away. I was saying last night, my one frustration right now is I've generally got a really good team, and if it wasn't for this move, I probably could step back and actually go climbing more. And yeah, ironically, I'm having to go almost like back in like full-time plus. But yeah, hopefully 25 will be a good year.
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe, but a good year depends whether or not you're super busy again and still involved, or whether it'll step back. But I guess we'll see. Yeah. So he's got a significant strategic change, and he's handling it extremely well. So please give it up, Mike Surtees.
Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that episode. 3 things you need to do now. Number 1, make sure you subscribe to this podcast so you do not miss an episode. Also, get on over to Amazon to get a copy of my latest book, Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity, 9.5 Steps to Improving Your Profits and Cash Flow. Also, join our Facebook group, the Turnover is Vanity, Profit is Sanity community, to connect with other business owners.